Well, I offered to introduce myself since I have kind of a long title, many titles, and so I thought I'd give them a break and not have to have people try and guess everything and include everything. I'm Jan Deeds, as it says on the slide. I am the director of the Women's Center, associate director of student involvement. My area of specialty is gender programs, so I advise 6 different student organizations that are related to gender and a couple that aren't. So just FYI, including Men at Nebraska, which is a group that looks at men and masculinities. That was my area of study with my doctoral work, and I teach every other spring. I teach an Intro to Men and Masculinities class. Dave, I got to talk to you about creating our little task group to talk about other classes that we want to do related, you and me and E here, to talk about men and masculinities classes. So people sometimes think Women's Center director, all she does is work with women, but that's not true at all. Because I've known since I was about 13, when I decided that I was a feminist, that if my life was going to change, if women's lives needed to change, that clearly men's lives needed to change too. And that if I felt oppressed by the expectations that were put on me, surely the expectations that were being put on my male colleagues and on my dad and everybody were also things we needed to examine. So that's what I do. When I got here in 1998 to be the Women's Center director, I had actually been here back in the 70s as a student, early 70s and then late 70s into the 80s when I was working on finishing my sad story. I started my undergraduate degree in 1973. At the end of my freshman year, my mother died. I was in the School of Music. At that point, we didn't have a lot of student affairs kind of focus, and so my faculty really didn't have any idea what to do. She died in the summer. I came back. I'm a perfectionist girl, so everything looked fine, right, on the surface. So they didn't know that I was kind of circling the bowl. So anyway, so at the end of my 3rd year, I starred in the opera and flunked all my classes. So I dropped out for 3 years and worked for a while. And when I came back, I took a class, a Women's and Gender Studies class with Helen Moore, Women in Contemporary Society, and met some students in there who said, you should come to the Women's Center, and they're doing cool stuff. We're going on a retreat next weekend. You should come with us. So I went to the meeting, went to the Women's Center, and they were having a meeting, which I was later to learn we always are having a meeting in the Women's Center because that time we operated as a collective. So that meant that everybody had their input on every decision. So order more paper clips, let's decide. Bring Mary Daly as a speaker, let's decide. All of those things we had to all agree on, which was an excellent training ground for me in terms of the kind of leadership I try and offer in the Women's Center still. I want the students who work with me and the faculty that I collaborate with and the staff that I collaborate with to feel like they own the issues as much as I do. It's not that the Women's Center needs to create bystander intervention training and make sure everybody gets it and knows how to be empowered by this, but everybody on campus needs to feel ownership of this and connected to it, which is why I'm so happy you've invited me here. So in 1998, when I came back as the Women's Center director, I remembered that historically, like when I was here in the 70s, the focus of what we did in terms of relationship violence was women aren't strong enough to defend themselves, let's teach them self-defense. That was kind of the focus because we were thinking at the time that it was strangers jumping out of the bushes, right? So obviously, I'm going to be comfortable kicking a stranger or breaking his nose or something, and it was clearly just that women were going to be victims and men would be perpetrators. No assessment of men as potential victims or anything. So that was kind of the focus then. But then in 1990, some research came out, or actually earlier than that, some research that said that victims, 90% of the time, college victims know their perpetrator, and 80% of the time in the general population. So it's a different thing about how to defend yourself from your roommate's boyfriend, or someone in your class that you're going to see the next day, someone who lives in the residence hall with you. You think differently about how is this going to affect my relationship with everybody else? We have the same friends. Acquaintance rape is very different, right? So in terms of what we do to train people to take care of that and think about that. So, but then for a while we were doing trainings about, the problem was that acquaintances, male acquaintances, didn't understand consent at all, didn't know how to respect women. So we needed to do some trainings for all men. And so what that did was that made men who were not ever in a million years consider sexually assaulting someone feel like, I think you're a perpetrator. So who wants to go to that kind of training? Who wants to go to a training that says, you're going to be a victim, you're going to be a perpetrator, let's all learn how to not do that. It was very hard. So what happened, what we realized was that if 1 in 4 women are going to be sexually assaulted in college, 3 out of 4 aren't, okay? And if some of the research says that from 5 to 15% of men will be sexually perpetrators, that means 85 to 95% aren't, right? So that's a lot of us, right? That's a big group, right? So let's find a role for everybody. So bystander intervention is the way that we go. And frankly, you may, in a situation, you may have been a victim in a situation, but have the opportunity to intervene in somebody else's situation, right? So we want to give people the skills and to think about the opportunity to intervene when you see a dangerous situation. Big picture, a bystander is somebody who observes a situation, a dangerous situation, or someone who's potentially a problem behavior and has the opportunity to intervene. That's the key part, that you have the opportunity. Now, when we do these presentations, the important thing to know is sometimes it's not safe to intervene. If I see a bunch of people having a fight on a street corner, I'm not the person to break that up, right? But I am the person with a cell phone who can call the police. Or I am the person who can look around at other people and say, should we do something about that? Can you help me? I have something I can do. It doesn't mean I have to be Wonder Woman and charge in and fix everything, even though I brought my Wonder Woman bag. So that's the point, is that you see an opportunity and you know what to do, right? You have some thoughts about what to do. So the stages of bystander behavior are very important because everybody can a bystander just by itself, you're just standing there, right? You're not really active. So we want to bring you into being an active bystander. So the first thing you have to do is you have to notice the behavior. And what we tell students is this is why it's important for you to go to presentations and classes and speeches and all kinds of things on campus and to interact with people who are different from you so that you can recognize what might be a situation that would be a problem for other people if it's not a problem for you. Because bystander intervention behavior, you can be a bystander to all kinds of things. It's not just about sexual assault. If you're in a class and somebody says a racist or sexist or homophobic thing, you have a moment where you can do something, right? And you have to think, what's the right thing to do? So noticing that somebody in the room would be offended by that statement and thinking about what to do, or seeing somebody in a situation and noticing it and identifying it as a problem. Then the next step is feeling like it's your responsibility to fix it, that you have some ownership of taking care of it. We'll talk a little bit about the barriers to intervention in a minute, but so feeling responsible and then having the skills to act. So we're going to talk about a variety of skills that you might use, a variety of approaches that we can do to different situations. And as we do with the students, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to each other a little bit about a scenario and think about what would be some different approaches you could do to that scenario. So be thinking if there's I want to give you the opportunity to identify a situation that you would like to talk about and share with each other. I didn't want to impose one on you. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so why are active bystanders essential? Well, clearly, if we know that not everybody, if you're a victim, you may not be in a position to protect yourself or to do something about it. I think about, well, for example, if I took a class in my master's program that the teacher knew that I was a volunteer at the Women's Center and purposely said really outrageous things about women to try and get a rise out of me. Now at the time I didn't feel very empowered. I didn't know, we didn't have lots of talk about Title IX and there wasn't much discussion about who I could talk to about this. I didn't really know that I kind of felt like I needed to take care of it. I think that's another thing that sometimes we were like, I'm a strong woman, I can take care of this. But it really affected how I was doing. And I think it affected everybody else in the class as well. So those kinds of situations, it would have been great if a bystander, if someone else in the class said, you know, you're picking on her because she's at the Women's Center. Don't you think that women deserve respect? You know, I'm going to tell the chair of the department. We're all going to complain about you because this is not a good climate. But we hadn't empowered everybody to do that yet. So that's a situation when, I mean, I did do some talk back to him, but I really wasn't in a position of power. He was the teacher. He was going to grade me, right? So I had to be kind of careful about what I did and how I did it. So those are the situations, that kind of situation. If you see someone, when we talk with the students, we talk a lot about alcohol or drug use. If you know that somebody isn't aware of their situation, isn't aware of the decisions that they may be being asked to make, you know, in terms, this is especially when we talk about sexual assault. If this is a person who is being either in a corner with somebody and you don't know if they know that person very well, you don't know that they're actually aware of what's happening so that they are giving consent for the behavior, you got to know somebody has to step in and say, let's make sure this is okay. Let's make sure that nobody's going to be upset tomorrow or this isn't going to hurt somebody. So those are the kinds of things where you have to notice the situation. Being the person who, when somebody says a racist thing on the plaza, you say to them, we don't do that here. Or, you know, somebody says that, gives that feedback. So, all right, so that's important. Also, you may not be the perpetrator or the victim ever, but you all have the opportunity, right? Everyone will be affected by one. I think if I were to ask everybody in this room to raise your hand if you knew someone who had been in a dangerous relationship, a lot of us would raise our hands. I certainly would. You know, somebody that you were worried that their partner was verbally abusive to them or physically abusive, someone who had been a sexual assault victim. Everybody knows someone in some way, right? So we know this, so now this empowers us to do something in the future to make difference. And then we're all part of this community, right? We're part of our classroom, we're part of our department, we're part of the university, students are part of the student organizations, we advise student organizations, we're part of Lincoln, we're part of Nebraska, part of all these larger communities. So it makes a difference. What we do makes a difference. Taking action, being empowered to take action makes a difference. So barriers to bystander intervention, this is important. This is what stops people from doing anything sometimes. And I think some of them are more, may feel more relevant to, I want you to think about how this might work in terms of your career situation. And then also, when we talk with students, it makes some sense. So one of the main reasons that people don't do it is because you don't know what's going to happen to you. If it's a situation where there might be physical violence, you might be afraid for your safety. If it's a situation where you might, okay, if you're in your department, if you're being sexually harassed and you are the only woman in the department or the only man in the department, this is happening to you, you're going to feel like it's hard to stand up and report it. What's going to happen? There may be some concerns. You might not, we want people to report, but you honestly don't know what will happen. Will I be ostracized by the rest of the department? I mean, there's rules against retaliation, but you know, you worry about those things, right? We deal with this a lot in terms of like fraternity and sorority or residence halls or sports clubs. If you report something that somebody in your group did, it can have an effect on your group, and there may be sanctions or something. And so if people know that you were the person who reported it, again, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my group? Lots of fear about that. It's not my business. We get a lot of messages, and you know, I've grown up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Not my business was like pretty much tattooed on us, you know, from the time we were little. You know, it's private. That's a private thing. You know, it's not my place to tell you what relationships you should be in, but it is my business. That's the student, their Prevent says, stopping violence is everyone's business. So it's always okay to be embarrassed. You know, one of the other reasons people don't do it is because I don't know what to do. I don't know that I'm understanding the situation correctly. I'm not really sure. If I step in and say, "Are you okay?" I'll be embarrassed, or they'll be embarrassed. I would risk embarrassment over someone being injured, right? So we always encourage people, think about it as there's ways to do it that aren't overpowering and overbearing. There's ways to gently ask questions and overcome that fear that it's not your business. Because often, if you're the person who's in the situation who needs some help, you're going to appreciate that somebody stepped past that fear of it's not their business. Diffusion of responsibility. And not knowing what to do, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit in terms of different options, ways that you might respond to a situation. Diffusion of responsibility, somebody else is going to do something. In the classroom, oftentimes, if somebody says something, students will look to the teacher to respond, right? A racist joke, sexist joke, some sort of thing that's happening. And they'll look to you, but maybe you didn't hear it. Sometimes that happens, but they'll look to you, and if you don't do anything, they'll kind of look around and see who else is supposed to do something. So I think some of it is, and you have to decide, should you do something right then because there's something else. So developing your thoughts about what are the ways that I'm going to respond to this. We talk a lot about having, in your syllabi, having your explanation of how you want your class to function, how we're going to treat each other in the class. And so then you can refer back to that in terms of respect or whatever, that we've already identified that this is an expectation for our class. That gives you a basis to go from. But again, diffusion of responsibility. And if I were to drop down here with a heart attack right now, if I was alone with one of you, I would be more likely to get immediate assistance than if you're all in the room. Because if I do this, who are you going to look to help me? Who do you think would help me? You're going to say, what? Yeah. Is there a nurse? Anybody know CPR? Is the person who organized this event going to take care of her? There's like, whose job is it if you have a lot of people, right? So going ahead and being the one who takes the responsibility is important. So recognizing that. We talk about pluralistic ignorance. That means that you think you're the only one in the room who's offended by the joke. You think everybody else is cool with it. Because there was some smattering of laughter, and you think, okay, I'm being the stick in the mud. It's just me. I'm overly sensitive. And so that's pluralistic. So you don't do anything because you think everybody else is okay with it. If I'm the person who told the joke and I hear the smattering, I'm going to think everybody thinks I'm hilarious, I'm fine, so I think I'm in the majority, when in fact, nobody else, a lot of people didn't like it. So recognizing that false consensus is, I think I've got everybody's approval, but I don't. So recognizing that and getting past that. So let's go to the next one. So we did a study in 2015 did a survey of students about bystander experiences, what they'd observed, their attitudes, and what they believed was important. And we thought that, and I was really pleased to see that we talked about a lot of things in the survey. We talked about sexual assault, we talked about hazing, we talked about racism, we talked about all kinds, homophobia, all those kinds of things. But in particular, because we do the violence prevention, sexual assault prevention stuff, this was particularly important to us. 95% of the students said they were very bothered, on the scale of not bothered at all to very bothered. But they only 75% thought that their peers would be very bothered. So again, I think that's that pluralistic ignorance. I think I'm the one that's more bothered by this, and most people don't care as much as I do. And then again, almost everybody thought somebody should intervene, but said that only about half the time somebody did. So that's important to recognize. So students, especially, this was our student survey, students want somebody to take action. They don't know how. And again, at the bottom here, the reasons they didn't, they were afraid for their safety, they didn't know how, and they didn't know when. Like in this situation, is it bad enough yet? Do I know what's happening? Should I step in now? How about now? How about now? And then fear of retaliation. Again, those were key things. And I think if you were to consider in your own situations, I think this is important skills to have in your family, in your friends, in your other community groups too. I can think of many situations where you think, should I step up? Should I say something? What will happen? I don't know exactly. Is this the time that I step in? I think we can all relate to that. And so having these skills is going to be very helpful. And I'm not assuming you don't have any of these skills. This is just a refresher for a lot of people. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and because I study men and masculinities, and because I think this is especially important, we don't always see a lot of men involved in violence prevention work. And part of that is because of these kinds of things, that most men assume, hold on, I gotta go to my next one. Okay, so research is that this is American College Health Association journal. It was Fabiano was printed in. Found that the sole predictor of men's willingness to intervene in sexual violence was if they thought other men would. So, am I okay? Do other men think this is a good thing to do? And then the other part of that is, again, goes back to pluralistic ignorance. Again and again, studies have demonstrated that college men underestimate other men's opposition to sexual violence. I'm the one who hates this, but the rest of the guys in my fraternity or my sports club or my group or my friends, they're not as bothered by this. They think it's kind of funny. I would be the only one. So they underestimate other men's willingness, and they're deciding on their own behavior based on what they think other men would do. So that's why Prevent tries to do so many presentations about this information that most people, that was men and women both, 96% were very bothered, men and women. Yeah.
I hate to add a comment now, but we live in an age where sexuality is so fluid, and we have images like, okay, Valentine's Day, 50 Shades Darker was out. So, you never know sometimes what someone's normal is, and that things are always changing, and maybe someone likes that type of a relationship. So maybe I don't butt in because I don't know what their preferences are. So I think as we have become more open about everyone's sexuality and what people like and don't like, and men getting involved in things like this, as far as the women only being the ones standing up, oh, this can't happen, it also adds even more confusion to it as things are just changing and evolving, and images that you see and are bombarded with every day, you're just not sure. What is your normal is maybe not my normal. So, and you hate to offend anyone by maybe standing up and saying anything, but yet at the same time, you don't want someone to be a victim of some sort of, this doesn't feel right to me, because maybe it's something they like. So, anyway.
So the question is, with people's different preferences and different experiences, when that really does add to the when do I intervene and what do I ask. That's why we're going to talk about times to intervene, indirect and direct opportunities. So you may not do something right at the moment, but you're going to talk to the person. Asking is always good. We think asking is important, and finding appropriate ways to do that and times to do that. So I hear what you're saying. So yeah, so that's an important thing. So let's go to the next thing, which is this is what I'm talking about now. So there are lots of things you need to decide when you're trying to figure out how to respond. So first of all, you have to figure out, should I do something right this minute, or can I do something later? If I fall down here, please don't slip a heart health pamphlet under my door tomorrow. Please take care of me right now, okay? So now is important. Or if you see someone being physically attacked, calling the police right then is important. If you're at dinner with a group of friends and one of the partners is really being verbally abusive to the other one, and you're not sure, you can say something then, or maybe you do something later. You can think about what's going to be most effective. Should we say to the person who's being very verbally abusive, hey, cut it out? Do we have that role with him or her? And do we then talk to the person who is being the target of that later and say, how can I help? Did you know there's resources? So there's a lot of things you can do. So again, now or later is a question, right away at the moment. My student talks about being at the mall in Omaha and seeing a toddler heading towards the down escalator, and nobody's certainly around, like a 2-year-old heading towards it, and so nobody seemed to be around, so she went and scooped the kid up, and then the parents were there. So clearly, now is important for that kind of a situation. So then you have to think about, what am I most comfortable with? What do I know how to do? What am I most likely to do? You have to think about your own strategies that are going to work for you. So direct approaches aren't always, when I say, confront the offender, people think confrontation means being aggressive and like, I'm going to yell at you and tell you what to do. But it just means approaching the person and talking about it, right? Confrontation is, I'm going to address the situation with the person, the things that are happening. And that might be now or later. Later I talked to my friend who was being verbally abusive and say, hey, when we were at dinner and you said this to him or her, does that happen a lot? And that doesn't seem like you're very happy in this relationship. Do you know that there's counseling? available on campus so that you guys could both be happier? What's happening with that? How can I help? Approaching the victim later and saying, this was uncomfortable. How do you know that there's victim services? Do you want to talk to a counselor? How can we help you? Because this feels bad for you. I don't think you guys are very happy. How can we help you? So again, talking to the offender directly, talking to the victim directly are always options. Changing the focus. Now I think I'm going to be able to show you. Can you click on the distract thing? This is a great example. I think it should be active. There we go. Okay. I used to use Thanksgiving as an example of a situation when you needed to have bystander intervention skills, because there's always going to be someone in your family that you disagree with on something, and they're always going to want to talk about it. And so how do you deal with that? And so we talked about, I would always say, you have Uncle Phil, who always talks about his time in Vietnam or Korea with my age group, right? And he talks bad things about Asian people, right? So how do we address that with Uncle Phil? What do we do? So direct is to say, Phil, that's not appropriate. Let's not talk about that now, right? That would be a direct approach. Every year, multiple times. That's not going to be very effective necessarily. And so other options would be to distract Uncle Phil. So, and that sort of combines, so you have to have a thought of like, these are the 8 things I'm going to say that will distract us and take us in a different direction, right? This is the topic I'm going to go the first time he does it. This is the next topic. Now you'll notice on the bottom there it talks about indirect approaches, engage others around you. Have a plan with the rest of your family, and reframing is another thing. Oftentimes people will, because I'm a counselor, so I spend my whole life reframing everything for people around me, which is annoying, for some people. But if you have had like I have students who their student organization just doesn't get as many people coming to it. They're really feeling bad about that, and so instead of they're just always saying, well, nobody's here. I'm like, okay, the 4 people who are here are not liking that very much, not feeling very respected. So let's reframe and let's think, well, there's 4 people that care about this. How can we build on that? Let's reframe. Let's think about this as 4 people who care very much, and that's our seed. That's our core group. How can we do that? So, helping people rethink of a situation. So, and for yourself, as a counselor, I help people reframe if they're having a negative feeling about something that's going on in their life. How can they rethink that? They feel powerless. When people come to me and they say, I'm having a terrible day, I think, well, you've just projected what you're going to have. Yes, you've said ahead of time how your day is going to be. Congratulations. It will be terrible because everything that happens to you, you will interpret through that terrible lens, right? So if you think, some terrible things happened to me this morning, boy, I hope the rest of the day is better, or I'm going to do whatever I can to enjoy the rest of the day. That's reframing. So I know it's not a new thing, but. And the other part about changing attitudes is the other option that you can do in terms of direct approach. And with Uncle Phil, that means a month before Thanksgiving, I call Uncle Phil and say, hey, can I bring lunch over? Can I bring some cookies to your house and hang out for a little while? And then you talk to Uncle Phil and about all kinds of stuff. And then you say, Uncle Phil, I've noticed that you talk about your experience, or you talk about this a lot. And I just wondered, would you tell me more about that, why you think that and where that comes from? Because I have a very different experience, and so I want to understand what you're trying to tell me. Because oftentimes when people say the same thing over and over again, they don't think anybody's heard them. So you listen to him and figure out what's going on with him, and you don't have to agree with him, but really trying to understand what's going on with Phil. And then you can say, well, can I tell you what my experience is, and give him that opportunity to hear what your experience has been. And then say, I'm concerned that when we have these conversations and you say these things in front of the kids, I think they're going to have a different opinion, or to have a bad feeling. Right? So can we not talk about that at Christmas? Or could we come to some agreement about what we're going to talk about and how we're not going to talk about it? So that's deep conversation, that's a deep investment. You're not going to do that with somebody that you're walking down the street and you heard them say, that's so gay. You're not going to say, okay, let's sit down for a while and decide why you're using that and what that means and how that feels. You don't really invest the time the same way with someone that you don't know very well, as you do with family members or friends or somebody. So thinking about that, that's always an option, I think, but you have to figure out if it's the right time or not. Indirect approaches, again, engaging others. Look around, ask other people to help you. With the students, I often talk about if you're at a party and you see somebody in a bad situation, you think, who are they with? Find out who their friends are. Find a friend. Is she okay? Is this what's happening? Is he all right? Let's intervene. Let's get other people all together to figure out what's going to happen. Again, in your class, if there's a problem happening, your students may talk to each other about how to handle something. You can talk to your colleagues. You know, I think this is a situation like oftentimes we'll have, like I know there's organizations like UAD and UNOPA. Maybe you talk in those meetings about here's a situation that sometimes happens. I'm working in the office and I hear things. So how do I respond? What's my appropriate way to do it? And you can practice and talk to each other. Here might be a way to respond to that. Here's a thing to do. So having conversation about it and empowering yourself and others to use some of these skills to intervene when you see a situation. And again, offering support so here's what I'd like to do. Since we have some time, I would like to have a couple people, maybe we'll leave that up for now so we can look at what our options are. And somebody at your table maybe, think of a situation, maybe a group of about 5 of you, and identify a situation that you might want to intervene in. It's going to happen pretty common. It might be something that somebody says in the classroom. It might be you get a paper that has some sort of conversation on it that you think somebody needs to respond here. If you're, just think of a situation. Can anybody think of one that you might want to talk about? I could give you some, but I really don't want to because I think it's more effective if it's stuff that you've experienced. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I had students. I taught a cultural food class, and I had students. They were supposed to research a certain culture, and I had students coming back with a paper that was clearly racist and stereotyped.
Okay.
So, what do you do as an instructor in that situation?
Okay, so if you get a paper back that's clearly racist or sexist, you know, yeah, or homophobic, what could you do in terms of that? That would be a good conversation. How about another topic over here? That would be a good thing for your group to talk about. Maybe we can move around a little bit. If you're a classroom teacher and you wanted, that might be a situation you would have. You guys could talk about that. Yeah.
This is an experience one of my students told me she experienced, so it could happen inside a classroom or outside a classroom, but on campus, where she was eating her lunch and a student sitting next to her was like, "That is disgusting." And she felt so hurt and offended by that. I mean, she was sitting there eating it, so obviously she didn't think it was disgusting, but she felt so judged. And so it's one of those kind of minor things that can happen, but I think those things happen a lot around us, and so like learning to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk about microaggressions,
Yeah.
those little things that if you get enough of them, you start to bleed. You know, it's a continuous thing. And yeah, exactly. So what those sorts of comments people make. So if you're the person who observes this situation, maybe talk about what you might do. Other situations that people experience. Yeah.
Yeah, my son was at a sports event, and it was right after the Paris attacks, and they had a moment of silence for people to stand, and there was this friend of his sitting next to him, and she was wearing a hijab, and she stood up, and someone afterwards came up to her and said, "Why are you standing? You're part of the problem." So, you know, he didn't know what to do, so I'm wondering those kind of situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how do we support the women on our campus who do wear hijab? You know, that's not going to be. What are some things we can do? How would you respond in that situation? Yeah.
We work on a collaborative grant helping parents and teachers support academic success of Latino students. And we recently had a situation where a student came home and told their parent that the teacher said that Trump is going to send all Mexicans back to Mexico. And so, like, talking that through with the parent and the teacher, and you know, supporting collaboration still and creating that partnership, and how we play a role in that, and and solving that big issue, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Good example. Yeah, the current climate. How, working with students who, I have students in one of my groups that one of the students is very conservative, and he's opposed to violence against women and things like that, but he was supportive of Trump, and that was difficult for some of the other students in the group who were very focused on some of the misogynist kinds of things that have been talked about. So how do you navigate that when you're advising a group, right? Or in the class, and you have students that, some classes, that's the question, is are faculty able to share their own views? And it depends on the class, it depends on the department, I suppose, but how do you do that? How do you help people talk about these issues? How do you do sort of civil discourse about things that we have very different opinions about? Yeah.
I actually went to a workshop that International Students and Scholar Office put on just last week, and it was more informational based on the executive orders that have recently come out, and students and scholars coming to their office asking questions and everything, what do I do? One woman in our group, and I do human resources within our college, so we do all hiring paperwork for people, but one of the women in the group who also does that same thing, she'd had an international student come in and they were getting ready to do all the paperwork for hiring, and she just asked the question, it's like, well, what is your country of citizenship? And she said this student just physically hung their head and barely whispered that they were from Saudi Arabia, and they were just afraid to even say where they were from because of the current climate that we're in. And the same thing, as far as even in an academic unit, a faculty member was concerned, it's like, well, I'm Muslim. Am I going to be deported? Am I going to be asked to leave? And we just want to make sure that everyone has that sense of inclusiveness and that, everybody is welcome. I have in my office what I call the problem-solving chair, that everybody knows they can just come in and sit down, and regardless of what the issue is, we can hammer it out and figure it out for anybody. So, I think our students and international scholars also feel, we're talking about, violence maybe against men and women, but I think the current climate we live in, as far as exclusion of certain groups of people as well, is also another issue, and how do we stand up and help them as well.
Sure, definite opportunities for bystander intervention, yeah.
Well, I think to Tammy's point, this is something I'm struggling with. I feel as a teacher, ill-equipped, even though I try, to intervene respectfully and honestly and immediately when a student says, all lives matter. We know that that's a very loaded statement. Or if a student is being sexist or racist or homophobic. So coming into this workshop, I was thinking along those lines, but the conversation around executive orders and everything else makes me think for the first time that we're all bystanders in our country, right? Watching these racist orders come down the pike. So I don't know, I would love someone to help me think this through, or to help all of us think it through. How do we be just and justice-oriented teachers and humans, and not be political? Yeah. It's just something I just don't even know where to go with it. So the only reason I bring this up is because, some of the examples that people are using relate to our current political climate. And so I don't want to get us off track, because I know that I imagine this was intended to be about more kind of concrete and specific experiences of bystander, you see someone being attacked. But I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that way.
No, I when I do these presentations, I think about it from all kinds of aspects. It's not just about physical assault or sexual assault. There's all kinds of moments where you have the opportunity to intervene in a situation. Emotional abuse, all kinds of situations. So I don't think you're taking us off track. I think if we identify situations that are really pertinent right now, what I'd like you to do is with 3 or 4 people or 5 or whoever that you're sitting with, pick one of those topics or something, one situation, and identify a direct and an indirect thing you could do. about that one topic, so that one concern. Just take a couple minutes and talk about what would be a thing you could do directly, what would be a thing you could do indirectly. And you can choose from any of those ones that people have identified, or if you have your own. So I have a question. As you were talking about your situations in this, you were brainstorming, was it helpful to think about this from a variety of responses? Was it helpful to step outside of the there's one thing to do kind of mindset? Because I think sometimes we think there's a right thing I must do here. And what I really think bystander intervention education does is it gives us the opportunity to think about a lot of other possible things that we could do. And so were there some, who at their table had like a creative solution that you wouldn't have thought about for the situation? Did anybody have one of those? I don't believe that about this group, but okay. All right, well, anyway, but I guess what I'm wondering is, oftentimes we think about the direct approaches. Who had an indirect approach to their situation? Can you briefly describe your situation? What was your indirect approach? Talk really loud, I think.
What you said, you saw messed up comments. Oh, I just had watched one way to handle if there's like a stranger and you see someone harassing someone who's also a stranger, but you want to help that person, it's better to not engage in conflict with the person who's harassing the person, but to go up to them and like say, hey, how are you doing? Do you want to go get coffee with me? To get them away from the situation and to like make them feel safe. I don't know if that's just something that I was saying.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's indirect. It's not saying there's a problem here, I want to point out there's a problem. It's just I'm oblivious to what's going on and I want you to go have coffee with me, and aren't you my friend? Didn't we go to high school together? You know, that kind of, or non sequitur, some sort of thing that's out of the blue. We also talk to students about using humor sometimes, trying to figure out a way to sort of get people off diffuse the situation. Another situation and a solution that you talked about. What were you guys talking about?
Well, I can bring that up, but I more would like to get some feedback on. Okay, I'll explain kind of. We're talking about differences in our departments in terms of staff versus faculty, or professors of practice versus tenure, student faculty. So things where there's lip service about we're equals, but then in the reality there can be microaggressions, or there can be real differences in power and how those conversations play out. And it was interesting that there was a faculty meeting where we were having some open discussions about this, and I think some of these patterns were occurring. And my approach was very indirect in that I went to the person who I felt might have felt victimized in that situation and talked to them. But there's a difficulty I have between the sense that I am in a position of power and yet I didn't use it in a direct way, and that was that not responsible? And I think about that as a faculty member. Like if you have a student in your class who was the victim of a racial comment and you go and you help and support them, that's great. But you also fail to use your power in a way that maybe you should have. I struggle with this.
And you haven't said to the rest of the group, this was inappropriate. Yeah, you haven't modeled that. So that's the question, yeah. It's hard. It's a challenge sometimes. You think, because again, you want to, you have to think, are people going to be listening to this? Is this a good platform for that? It's hard. And I think that's the other thing, is like most of these things are never going to be just over, right? So you could still talk to the group and say, when this happened, I thought about this and I'd like to talk more about that because this is what I observed and let's talk about it. So the later part can still happen. So, but other topic, or what were you guys? So you were having PTSD, Dave. What was that about?
We weren't talking so much about, we eventually got to talking about specific incidents, but we were talking about climate and what what can we do to change the culture and the climate so these kinds of incidents happen less frequently.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think that is our challenge always. I mean, since I got here in '98 as the director of the Women's Center, and when I was here as a student ages ago, the question of what does it mean to be a member of this community, what's the behaviors that are expected in this community, is an ongoing one. And looking at, you can't be the Women's Center director and not talk about power, and think about who has power and who doesn't have power. I think we don't talk about classism on our campus as much as we could. There is a difference in our social structure here, and we don't always acknowledge that. So those kinds of things, talking about who has power and who doesn't, and that's what the bystander is. Usually a person. Sometimes you're the person who has more power, and sometimes you're not. But there's still stuff that you can do, right? So one of the greatest things I took the 7 Habits course, right? And one of the things that was very useful, and I don't know who originated it. It wasn't in Stephen Covey, but there's the issue of the circle of influence and then the circle of concern. So the circle of influence is right around you, and it's stuff that you can have an impact on. Things you can do, right? Something you can have an effect on. And then outside of that is a lot of stuff you care about, you have concern about, but you cannot directly change, right? You cannot directly influence. So sometimes you use the things you can do to influence outside, like it's who you know. If what I'm concerned about, I have a friend who has some of that more direct impact, then I can work with them. That could be my area of influence. But so thinking about that in terms of what do you, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's another concept I think about. It's like, is this something that I can do something about? And if so, what are my options? If it's nothing I can do, but I know somebody who could, then part of what I can do is talk to them and ask them to do something about it. So recognizing that. And I think we talk with the students all the time about this because we want you to know that you have all of these options and you always have some kind of power. There's always something that you can do. Even if it's just comforting someone, if it's just saying to someone, I heard that happened and that's terrible. You're not crazy, that was a bad thing. Doing something like that sometimes is really powerful. So, encouraging people to think about bystander intervention, bystander skills as something that you can use in all kinds of situations. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking of something that we can all do is like students that we meet in the hallway, make eye contact and smile. Mm-hmm. That's so, and everybody probably does that, but it's so simple to do.
Mm-hmm. Acknowledging someone's presence, just making eye contact with students, making eye contact with people, saying hello. That does make a difference. If you can go through a whole day and feel like nobody noticed that you were there. That was one of the things that was most powerful for me when I came back to school as an undergrad after having been out for a while. When I came back and getting involved with the Women's Center, I had a group of people who noticed when I didn't come in, who noticed and asked how things were going and gave me some advice about this is a teacher you should take, this is a teacher you might have a harder time with, gave me that kind of information. And cared about me, acknowledged me, and encouraged me. And unless you have that belonging, if we talk about retention, that's a key thing, knowing that you belong here. And there's stuff that all of us can do to help people know that, so that's really important. I want to click to the next slide because when you're making a decision about what to do, I want you to, there's some things to think about in terms of if you're deciding what you're going to do. If you do something, whatever your action is, what will be the effect on, and this is framed in the sexual assault context, but in terms of the person who is the target of the hostility or the harassment, or the person who is doing the harassing or targeting the person, and then bystander, you and other people around. So depending on what you do, what will be the effect on this person? If you see a toddler at the top of the escalator and you don't do anything, it's going to hurt the toddler, you're going to feel terrible about it, and there's no perpetrator there. The escalator won't care, right? But so thinking about that, what will be the impact if I don't do anything? Or if I do this, what will be the impact? And then thinking about being creative and thinking ahead. There are common things that happen all the time. We know from year to year, this is the time that this is going to be talked about. This is the time that this will be the focus. This is the time that the issues are happening. Let's plan ahead. Or I tell the students, you go out with the same people every weekend, right? So you know who are the people that are going to have an argument. Who are the people that get too drunk? Who are the people that do? You know who are the people. When I was in high school, I had to babysit Luann every weekend. It was terrible, You're just like, okay, I have to make sure, because I didn't drink, but, just making sure she's okay. And she was a weeper, so just, but I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't think I needed it. I felt like I just needed to take care of it. Well, if I talked to everybody else and said, should we talk to somebody about this? I might have had more fun on the weekends, you never know. But so thinking about who else can I bring into this? Who can I talk to? And what are some other options that we can have? I encourage you to bring the bystander intervention discussion to regular meetings, to regular times. When they have a situation, think, okay, from a bystander intervention perspective, what are the many choices we have here? What could we do? This is something we care about. And I think you're exactly right that the current political climate, we are bystanders to that. What can we do? We see the students come weeping into my office, and I have to know what to do. I have to do something that's going to empower them. I tell them action is the antidote to despair. So here's some things we can do. Let's talk about that. What's going to make it better? Make you feel more powerful, more in charge of stuff. So thinking about knowing ahead of time what's going to happen and what you can do. Know what you're really going to do. If your plan, your comfort level and style. I am a big flaming extrovert. I will talk to strangers. I will go ahead and give people my opinion. I just do. I have friends. My husband would die 1,000 deaths before he did that, right? He would not ever do that. But he would say to me, I wonder what's going on over there. And I'll go over, So introvert, extrovert partnerships, right? So find your person who's most likely to be the one who'll go over and do it. Or sometimes, but he's very good in one-on-one little conversations with people, He'll go over and sit by somebody and find out what's going on, and they'll be okay, But so knowing your strengths, knowing what you're likely to do, knowing who's your colleagues, who's your people that are going to help go with you to take care of things. Make sure you think about those scenarios, and think about policies and procedures. What's expected of you in your job? What does your contract say you can and can't do? My funding as the Women's Center Director, student involvement is funded, student affairs were funded through student fees. So I really have to think carefully about choosing a political side. Now, being a woman is kind of political anyway, right? I mean, there's some people think, it's really hard to be the Women's Center Director and not take a political stand sometimes, right? It feels like yes, I'm in favor of women not being abused. Yes, there you go. Arrest me. But I think, those are the questions. You're like, what's expected? I do have to be careful. I want to make sure that students who voted for Trump can come and use our counseling services and check out our library books and talk to me about anything they need to talk to, participate in our groups. I want that because I want that open conversation with everybody. I want to model how do we listen to each other and learn from each other. Now, sometimes that's painful, right? Sometimes that's really hard, but that's what we do. And so thinking about what are the restrictions you have, and then the other part is knowing who are the people who are in different roles who can take a more active role, can be more political, can speak out, can do things, knowing how you relate to other people and what they can do. Again, circle of influence, circle of concern. So let's go to the next slide, just one more thing here. So this is Prevent. I want to tell you that we need more students to be involved in Prevent. Our peer education group functions on the fact that we have students who people perceive as their peers. Our group is very small this semester. Last semester we had like 22 students. They were very active, very engaged. A lot of people graduated. A lot of people are taking harder classes this semester, so we have a much smaller group. And we don't have representatives from all kinds of populations on our campus. So if you are working with a group of students, that you could encourage one of them to come to Prevent. I personally think that if you have one person in your group who's had Prevent training, they're going to be the one who says to the group, oh, let's think about this from this perspective. Or no, that's a myth, that's a stereotype, that's not right. So my vision is to have somebody from each residence hall floor, somebody from each fraternity and sorority, somebody from different clubs, different departments, different colleges, student advisory boards. We need more students to be involved in Prevent and to get the training so that wherever they are, it's the informal education that's the most important part that they do. They stand up and do presentations for groups and stuff, but what's really important is at the party, they can say to somebody, you know what, we need to do something, and do that modeling, right? They can give somebody, the one who's the president of Prevent about 10 years ago said that she always carried victim advocate brochures in her purse because every party she was at, somebody said, hey, I heard that you're part of this group, and do you know I have a friend who, and so she could share that information. So I just want to make sure that everybody has access to the information, that we have more students who feel empowered to get the information. And so I'm asking you to please help me get students, and inviting Prevent to present at your student organizations, in your classes, and whatever. We want to bring this information to the classroom. And obviously we'd do it as a 45-minute kind of thing so it fits in class time. So go to the next one. Here's the last slide is our victim advocate. Now most of you might have a victim advocate magnet in your office. If you don't, I brought some extra ones. You all have a brochure on your desk, and you probably had one of those already. The Prevent bookmark is our bystander intervention bookmark. We have 4 or 5 different kinds of bookmarks. One is about healthy relationships, like red flags of relationships. One is about sexual assault, one's about dating and domestic violence and stalking, and one's about resources. So we have a set of those, but the one I brought you is the one about bystander intervention. It just got some key things to remember about barriers and about options and stuff. So it's a good thing to remind yourself. You can come and get some more of those, or you can have Prevent come to your group and we hand these out like candy. We just give them away all the time. I also wanted to point out, I guess there was one more slide. It's the link to, this is the book that this is mostly based on. Alan Berkowitz, we brought him here about, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, to do a training for the Nebraska Consortium on college alcohol use. And so he did training for lots of people from different colleges and universities in Nebraska. This is a really good book. It's really short, it's really easy, and basically it's called Responsibility. And basically he has these settings, these situations, and he's got all kinds of examples of ways people responded and different things. So just reading it expands your thoughts. Oh, I never thought about approaching it that way. So it's a really good book. It's pretty cheap. Look up Alan Berkowitz online, and he published it. So I emailed him and said, can I get a bunch for cheap? And he said yes. So you might try that. So I'm teaching my class, I'd like to have 30, that kind of thing. So, but I think it's a really useful resource. We have it in the Women's Center. You can check it out. I'd really recommend you use it. It's a good thing. It's written for students. Everybody can. It's very accessible. So, and any questions people have or comments? I know we didn't get to share everybody's thoughts, but questions or comments? Let me out of here. No. I really appreciate all of your intensity and your focus. I want you to keep talking with each other about this. If you want to call me, if you have a specific question or issue you'd like to brainstorm a little bit, I'm always available. I didn't bring business cards, but you can find me in the directory. So, JD's one, there I am, can't miss me. So do come over. Women's Center is coming upon we have a lot of programming coming up in March is Women's History Month. Eating Disorders Awareness Week is February 28th, so there's a bunch of stuff that week. The following week, Kimberly Dark on the 6th, we're bringing Kimberly Dark, who's a sociologist, who does a program called Things I Learned from Fat People on a Plane, because she's a woman of size, and so she notices sizeism, and so I think she's really a body positive warrior, and it's going to be really good. She does a sort of humorous but educational presentation, so we're bringing her. Women's Week, lots of stuff. I hope you'll get a table at the Women's History Month banquet on March 15th. I'd like to see lots of you there. And if you haven't nominated someone for 2 things, one is for the Chancellor's Commission on the Status of Women, Outstanding Contributions to the Status of Women. There's a student award, student or student organization. There's a faculty and staff or department award. So think about, has some department, somebody on campus done something to help women succeed on campus. The other thing is for Women's Week, we do Women of Character, Courage, and Commitment. You nominate people and everybody wins. So if you're nominated, we'll put your picture and your nominator's statement up. We make posters of them and put them up on the Cafina Cafe wall. We present them at the Women's History Month banquet. We welcome people and acknowledge people there. So if you have somebody you think needs to be recognized and you don't want them to possibly lose, just nominate them for this. Because we just thought, it's hard. We do have the outstanding things all the time, but there's people who do stuff that's important to me that may not matter to the whole campus, but it mattered to me. So that's why we do that. So anyway, and there's all kinds of stuff happening. So check in with the Women's Center, come and do stuff. So thank you very much. Oops. Oh, yeah. I forgot to say where the Women's Center is, and I didn't bring our Women's Center cards. We're in the Nebraska Union, room 340. It's on the 3rd floor. We have a counseling room and a meeting room, and we have a big old space with a library, and then I have an office there. So we're up next to where the LGBTQ Resource Center is as well. So lots of resources. Thank you for asking. So.